Hi, I'm Huck, one of more than 50 million Americans currently living without health care insurance. I can't afford it, my employer doesn't provide it, and the truth is, businesses that do are increasingly less likely to hire people my age because of the high costs involved. For me, the Affordable Health Care Act, passed into law and signed by President Obama, is a very personal issue. I take it personally that Republicans are not only working so hard to repeal this law, but that they're not being honest about why. Everything you've heard them say about Obamacare is a smokescreen. They say they oppose the Affordable Health Care Act because of the individual mandate, forcing some people and some businesses to purchase insurance for themselves or their employees even if they don't want to. Republican state attorneys general all across the country have taken this new law to court, challenging the mandate on grounds that it's unconstitutional. But it's not really the individual mandate that has their dander up. After all, the idea was theirs to begin with. It was first proposed way back in 1989 by the most prominent, most influential conservative think tank in Washington, Heritage Foundation. As early as the 1980s, the rapid rise in the cost of medical services and the insurance coverage to cover them raised concerns that it was finally time to change the healthcare system in America. There was a general consensus that it was time to do something to cut the high costs of medical care and to do something that would help ensure the tens of millions of Americans who had no health care coverage. And a big part of the problem were those millions of people without health insurance. The costs of treating them, since they couldn't pay it themselves, were being passed on to everyone else in the form of higher costs for medical services, higher insurance premiums, and fewer choices in the policies you could purchase. And it escaped no one's notice back then that wherever you looked around the world, increasingly, other countries were turning to a government-run healthcare system, eliminating profit from the whole healthcare equation, insuring everyone, and holding down medical costs. Knowing that Democrats in Congress were in favor of just such a system here in America, Republicans needed to do something. They knew that such a plan would be hard to argue against. After all, every country that had a government-run healthcare system paid half as much as Americans paid for their health care. And even more impressive, folks that benefited from these programs loved it. I mean, really loved it. These happy folks are literally dumbstruck that we still haven't implemented such a system here in America. To head them off at the pass, President George H.W. Bush had his advisors prepare a plan. They called it the Health Equity and Access Reform Today Act. And in it, everyone would be required to have a health care insurance policy. Yep, an individual mandate. And as you can see, many prominent Republicans at the time sponsored this bill. But Bush never actually introduced the bill, knowing that Democrats who held power in the Congress wanted to go with the proven model used everywhere else. Then Democrat Bill Clinton took office and immediately assigned his wife Hillary the task to head a commission looking at ways to reform health care in America to help reduce the runaway costs. Republicans, along with their well-heeled backers in the insurance and pharmaceutical industries, launched a full-scale attack. If you're old enough, you might even remember some of the TV ads they were running at the time, alerting America to the dangers of a government-run healthcare system. The inference is that it would basically kill us all, putting our health in the hands of Washington bureaucrats. They didn't actually use the term death panels in those TV ads, but the scare tactic was identical. Meanwhile, Republicans led by Rhode Island Senator John Chafee introduced a countermeasure to whatever Hillary and her commission were likely to come up with. Republicans called their bill the Consumer Choice Health Security Act of 1994. And again, as you can see, most of the prominent Republican leaders in the House and Senate co-sponsored the bill. That same year, Rick Santorum was running for a Senate seat in Pennsylvania against a fellow Republican by the name of Joe Watkins. Santorum now says he's against the individual mandate, claims that it's unconstitutional, and another example of big government getting in the way. But that's not how he felt back in 1994. Back in 1994, Santorum campaigned on a platform for mandated insurance coverage. Mitt Romney, of course, worked with a Democratic legislature in the state of Massachusetts to pass ObamaCare. So, here we are today, after decades of devising, promoting, and pushing for a plan so very similar to Obamacare. Suddenly, Republicans are opposed to it. They say it's about the individual mandates, but obviously, that's not the case. For anyone paying attention, it's been obvious from the start of the Obama administration that Republicans have been willing to sacrifice everything. Jobs, America's credit rating, America's relationships around the world, even America's economic stability. Everything. For a chance at painting Obama's call for change as a complete failure. They bet the house on a strategy that if they could block all progress under Obama, they could ride the resulting disappointment and frustration all the way to taking back the White House in 2012. And the truth is, no accomplishment by the Obama administration deserves more credit or more clarification than the Affordable Health Care Act. It's the first significant health care reform in this country in 45 years. Of course Republicans were going to attack it. And because it was such a significant achievement, Republicans have attacked it with more vitriol, more distortions, and more legal challenges than anything else Obama has done while in office. Now, like anything else that comes through Washington, the Affordable Health Care Act is far from perfect. Liberals object, and rightly so, that it doesn't go far enough. It promises to cover probably a little more than half of those currently uninsured in America, but it doesn't really address the rising costs of medical care. Liberals wanted to see that government-run system, or at least a public option that would force private insurance companies to compete with a low-cost, non-profit system. Still, as it is, the Affordable Health Care Act does include some impressive, long-needed reforms. It does cover more than half of the uninsured in this country. It will reduce the out-of-pocket costs for senior citizens. It eliminates preconditions as a reason for denying coverage. And it stops insurers from dropping or denying coverage to folks who suddenly get seriously ill. Always the pragmatist, Obama decided to get what could be gotten and save for another day that fight for even more improvements to the plan. Given the opposition he faced, he was determined not to waste his efforts on yet another attempt at healthcare reform that would end up getting nowhere. Like a smart football coach, he decided to take what the defense would give him. And with that success, it should be no surprise that Republicans have done everything in their power to attack it. Now, you would think Republicans and their pals in the insurance industry would love this new law. After all, it's given these insurance folks 30 million new customers. And ever since Democrats pushed through Medicare in the 1960s, well, few industries have been friendlier to Republicans than the whole consortium of privately run healthcare insurance companies. So why are Republicans working so hard to challenge the constitutionality of this new law? It's going to come before the U.S. Supreme Court later this summer. And after their Citizens United ruling, where the court basically threw out 100 years of existing law so that they could put their conservative stamp on their decision, all bets are off on how they're going to judge the Affordable Health Care Act. The irony here is that it's not the individual mandate at all that has Republicans so riled up. I mean, that much should be obvious from the fact that it was a Republican idea to begin with, and one they've been fighting for more than 20 years. No, it's something much, much scarier for Republicans, and in particular for their really wealthy financial backers. They just can't say it. They don't talk about it. They won't talk about it. They're embarrassed to talk about it. The closest they come is when they talk about Obama's class warfare. Because to tell the truth of why they really oppose the Affordable Health Care Act would only be further proof of what we already know about the Republican Party today. That the only folks the Republican Party truly serves are some very, very rich people. Those people who help them fund their campaigns, who have, over the last 5 or 6 years, weeded out practically every moderate voice in the Republican Party. And they know if they don't do these folks' bidding, they'll be the next to go. So they have to lie, or make stuff up, or come up with some reason that can gain public support for why they're against this new law. Even if that argument is a complete reversal of everything they have pushed for 20 years. And Republicans are getting pretty good at this. They're turning their backs on their own ideas at a record pace. Cap and trade was one such idea. Republicans came up with it, promoted it, pushed for it, until Obama supported it. Now they call it an abomination that will destroy businesses nationwide. The bank bailouts in September of 2008 is a really good example. 2 months before Obama was elected, Republicans begged, pleaded, and cried for Congress to give gazillions of dollars to the biggest banks in this country. Do it before the whole world comes crumbling down, they said. It was Obama, you may remember, who actually put some stipulations in the bailout bill that the banks would have to pay the money back with interest, and that they would be penalized. For instance, they wouldn't be able to pay out any bonuses to their top executives, and they'd have to undergo oversight of their business practices until that money was paid back. Do you remember how Bush's original bailout bill was a complete giveaway, no strings attached? Bush's original bill was basically a paragraph long that said, "Take these gazillions of dollars, please." Now, of course, to listen to Republicans, you would think that the bailouts were all Obama's idea. But with the law they label ObamaCare, the attacks have been relentless. A fight to the last man standing that shows absolutely no sign of letting up. So, what besides pure politics is driving this? It can be found in the funding mechanism of the law. For the first time ever, those making income from their investments, or at least those in the top 10% tax brackets or so, will have to pay a mere 3.8% on the income they derive from those investments toward Medicare. That's right. This whole fight is over a tax of less than 4% on investment income for the wealthiest Americans. You see, investment income in this country has long been sacrosanct. It's been untouchable for the purposes of Social Security or Medicare. Presently, investment income is only taxed at a 15% capital gains tax rate. That's actually a much lower tax rate than most folks who work for a living have to pay. The Health Care Reform Act makes these specific changes to the tax code. It instructs that beginning in 2013, those folks earning $200,000 or more, in the case of couples filing jointly $250,000 or more, well, they're going to have to continue to pay the 1.45% Medicare tax on the first $200,000 or $250,000 of their income, but anything above that, they'll have to pay an additional 0.9%, a little less than 1% additional tax on the money they make above those thresholds. Now, folks fortunate enough to earn a healthy income that puts them among the top tax brackets in this country will find that they have to pay a 3.8% tax on their stocks, bonds, annuities, rental property, or other investment income. While the vast majority of wealthy folks in America probably want to do their fair share, it's a very small, very rich, very greedy minority that must stop Obamacare at all costs. So, when you see Mitt Romney, Newt Gingrich, Rick Santorum, Ron Paul, Mitch McConnell, or Eric Cantor wailing about the horrible consequences of Obamacare, remember just what it is they're actually wailing about. It's about the money. It always is. Money needed so that those who have been denied insurance coverage because of a precondition, or those who have been thrown off their insurance policy or denied coverage under their policy because of a serious illness, will never see that happen again. Money that can only be found where 60% of the wealth in this country now exists. On capital gains that is barely taxed, or in some cases not taxed at all. Money that belongs almost exclusively to the richest 1% in America. Money needed to assist the uninsured in this country. People like me, who at age 55 feel fortunate to have a job, even one that doesn't provide health care insurance, because we realize how difficult it is today to find a job that provides health care insurance to people like me.